Here are the 10 powerful tips to break the 1200 rating. First tip, do not leave hanging pieces. For example, look at this situation. Black has just moved his bishop over here in order to guard this pawn. But that's not a good move because this bishop is hanging and white can now take advantage of this hanging piece by playing queen to e4. Not only the queen is attacking this h7 pawn and threatening to checkmate black, but at the same time this queen is now attacking the undefended bishop over here on the b4 square. Obviously black will have to first deal with this checkmate threat, so he will play g6, but now he will end up losing his bishop. Tip number 2. Check for threats from your opponent's last move. Chess is not about making random moves on the board. Whenever your opponent makes a move, you have to think twice as to why did he play that. So for example, in this situation, black is tremendously up in material and this should be an easy win for black. He's up by 7 points. But white has not given up the game yet and now he plays bishop to d3. But since black is up in material and has got too overconfident in the game, he doesn't think the importance of this move and gets greedy and captures another pawn. So he plays knight takes g4 and he gets very happy. Now I'm up in material by 8 points. White is just slowly losing material one by one. But because black did not did his calculation well, though he is up in material, he's going to quickly lose the game. Why? Because the entire idea of playing this bishop to d3 was to attack this h7 pawn over here. This h7 pawn was being attacked by 3 of white's pieces, as you can see. And since black was careless and didn't do any calculation and didn't think about white's last move, therefore he's gonna lose the game now, because white can now play bishop takes h7 check, king moves to h8, bishop g8 check, king takes g8, and now queen h7 is beautiful checkmate. So doesn't matter even if you have got material advantage in the game or even if you have a winning position, you should never fail to calculate or find out the reason as to why your opponent played that particular move. Tip number 3. Stay alert for possible forks on c2, c7, f2, f7 squares. So especially in the opening part of the game, these squares c2, c7, f2 and f7, these squares are particularly weak and vulnerable to attack by the opponent's knights. So you have to pay extra attention to make sure that your opponent doesn't attack one of these squares, which might lead to loss of material. So for example, in this situation, it was white's turn and white just developed this knight on the c3 square, thinking that it's a good move since he has developed his knight. But white has not paid attention that this black's knight was attacking this weak c2 square. Although this square was being defended by this bishop over here, but that is not sufficient because this bishop can easily be captured by this bishop over here. And because white didn't do his calculations well, he just made a random developing move, knight to c3. But this random move makes immediately lose the game because black can now play bishop takes bishop. Now the defender of this pawn is gone. Now it doesn't matter with which pawn white takes back. Even if he takes with the c pawn, the square is still vulnerable to attack. So black will take advantage of that. So black will now play knight c2 check, forking white's pieces. King moves to d1 and now knight takes rook loses material for white. So always pay extra attention to these 4 squares, especially in the opening part of the game. Tip number 4. Learn to counter attack. The reason why you are stuck at 1200 is because you hardly look for counter-attacking moves. When your pieces get attacked, you tend to just think of the defensive moves. For example, look at this situation. Here, black attacks this centralized knight with the move f6. So, I want you to pause this video here and think for a moment that what would you play as white? So you must have think of the obvious moves like knight takes knight or either knight moving back here or maybe something else, but what you're doing is you're just thinking on the defensive lines. Well, you need to defend this knight, but before you think of any defensive moves or any capturing moves, think for a moment, are there any better moves that counterattacks black's army? Well, the best move over here is bishop takes h7 check. So we are sacrificing our bishop over here. Black will get greedy and capture this bishop back, but this sacrifice has just opened up black's king and now white can easily attack this king with queen h5 check. King moves to g8 and now knight to g6. Well, you must be thinking that now we are losing a piece over here. Well, actually not, because if black makes the mistake of capturing this bishop, then believe it or not, knight to e7 is a checkmate. Let's go back. So that is why in this situation, black will not capture this bishop, but he'll rather play something else which opens up lines for his pieces and tries to protect this king. So he might play knight to b6, but in that case you can just play bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, and now rook to e7, bringing another attacking piece towards black's king. Now even this square is taken care of, so black king doesn't have any escape room, and now no matter what black plays here, if he captures the rook over here, then he's still losing the game. If he doesn't capture the rook and just try to make some space for this king, but that doesn't help either, because queen to h8 would be a checkmate. Tip number 5. Don't let the rooks penetrate on the 2nd or 7th ranks. So here black is up in material by 1 point, and it is black's turn in the game, and I have seen beginners get so greedy with material that they just lose their thinking ability and they do not put in efforts to find best moves on the board. So here it was black's turn to play, and the player who was playing with the black pieces had a rating of about 1150, and since he is up in material, he is up by 1 point, he just quickly grabs another pawn with his queen and plays queen takes c2 and gets very happy. Oh, I've taken one more pawn and I should be winning. But that immediately loses the game. You know why? Because the player playing with the white pieces was a smart one, and he immediately took advantage of black's careless move. He played rook b7 check. Notice how the rook has penetrated to the 7th rank. The 7th rank and this 2nd rank are the best places to get your rooks on. So the player who plays with the white pieces should aim for getting their rooks on the 7th rank, and the player who plays with the black pieces should aim to get their rooks on the 2nd rank. So one rook has already entered black's territory, and you must be thinking, hey, that's not a good move because black can easily capture that, right? Well, that's right, black can capture this rook, but after this move, this bishop who was guarding this square over here earlier is now not able to defend the square. So white can now get another rook in black's territory with the move rook to d7 check. King moves to e8, and now bishop takes f7 check. Rook takes f7, and now queen takes rook is a checkmate. Notice how these rooks were too deadly to launch an attack on black's king and finish off his game. Tip number 6. Watch out for quick checkmates. Now you must have already seen a lot of quick checkmates like scholar's mates, fool's mate, legal mate and whatnot. And you must be wondering, hey, I know these checkmate traps and I generally don't fall into such traps. But believe it or not, even if you know those patterns, you still fail to recognize those common patterns in the actual games. And this is what exactly happened in this game. Here it was white's turn to play. And I'll pause this video for a moment and I want you to think, what should white play here? Well, black is up in material and black's rook is under attack, so here white played the common looking move knight takes rook because that wins material, right? But that immediately loses black's game. You know why? Because black now played knight f3 check, is sacrificing his knight. But why? Because that knight was sitting in the way of his bishop, which was trying to eye this important and weak f2 square. Now notice after this sacrifice, black is also threatening to checkmate white here. Now it doesn't matter with which of the pawn white captures back, because after pawn takes knight, queen takes f2 is a checkmate. And I'm sure all of you watching this video are already aware of this checkmate pattern, and you must have guessed it right. Yes, it is a scholar's mate. Tip number 7. Don't underestimate the power of a passed pawn. Let's look at this situation. The material is even. Black has a passed pawn which is about to queen here. It's very close to white's territory. White also has a passed pawn, but then it's too far off from reaching to the end of the board. But white doesn't take this passed pawn very seriously and makes a random looking move, queen g7 check. You must be thinking, what's wrong with the move? You're just checking black's king, which is good, right? But it's actually not, because king will move to a6, and now how can you stop the promotion of this pawn? If you get your queen to e7, then black can finish off your game with queen f2 check, king moves to d1, and now queen d2 would be a checkmate. Let's go back. And if you try to get your queen to the c3 square, then that doesn't help either, because queen f2 check, king moves to d1, e2 check, king moves to c1, and now this pawn promotes into a queen, queen takes queen, queen takes queen, and white is terribly down in material, and this is an easy win for black. So never underestimate the power of a passed pawn. If your opponent has a passed pawn, by all means try to stop that pawn. So let's go back and look at this situation. How could have black stopped this pawn? So instead of giving a check on the g7 square, white should have got his queen to the h7 square. Now how does that make any difference? Well, I'll show you. See, the king moves on a6, and now because the queen is on the h7 square, it can now come to the d3 square. So queen d3 check, king moves to b6, and now we have kind of equalized the game, because after these moves, queen can guard this square over here and also this square, and now the black queen cannot use to check the white king, and the game is now equal and it should be a draw. You can try to play this position with your computer if you are interested to know how can white draw the game, because white is now attacking this black queen over here. So queen has to move somewhere else, or it has to trade queens. If black queen takes a white queen, then white will easily win this game, because no matter what black does, black cannot stop the queening of both of the pawns. And if black queen doesn't take this queen, then he has to move somewhere else. So he will move to queen to g2, and there is nothing that black can do now. It's a balanced game, and white has taken care of black's passed pawn and the important squares from where the black queen can attack white's king. Tip number 8. Stay calm when your king is attacked. And this position you must have already seen. This is e4, e5, bishop c4, knight c6, and now queen h5. You know, whenever the queen comes out on the board like this, all beginners I have seen who are below the rating of 1200, they tend to panic. They are like, oh my god, the queen has come out, it's attacking this pawn, I'm gonna get checkmated, let me do something. And then they play a hasty move like knight to f5, thinking they are attacking the queen, but they quickly get checkmated. So it's not that you do not have the ability to checkmate your opponent. It's just that in critical situations, you tend to panic a lot. And then because of that panic mode, you make bad decisions on the board. So I can see, everybody can see that, you know, white is threatening to checkmate here. So just take your time and think of the best move here, how you can counter attack. The best move over here is either g6 or maybe queen to e7 or f6. And all of these moves stops this checkmate immediately. But you can only find such good moves if you are able to think clearly and calmly in critical positions. So whenever your king is under attack, whenever your opponent is threatening to checkmate you, do not panic. Take your own sweet time and find out the best move on the board. Tip number 9. Avoid making aimless moves that waste time on the board. For example, here in this situation, black plays bishop to b4 check. He and gets very happy that, you know, I am attacking my opponent's king. This should be such a good move. But guess what? Your opponent can easily block this check with c3, counter attacking your bishop now. Now again you have to move your bishop. So you will move to a5, which is another bad move, because your opponent can again attack your bishop with b4. Again your bishop has to be moved, so you now move it to b6, and now he plays a4 in order to trap your bishop. So now you will have to play either a6 or a5. Let's say you play a6, and now he attacks, and then you move your bishop back. So just imagine, after all of these moves you have played, what you have achieved? Nothing. You first moved your bishop over here to this square, then to this square, then to this square, then here. Like it took you 1, 2, 3 and 4 moves to get your bishop here on this diagonal. And in those 4 moves, your opponent has created a strong pawn chain on the queen side of the board. Look how beautifully these pawns are placed and how much space your opponent has gained by moving these pawns forward. So what has black achieved? Nothing. Black has just wasted time by making this aimless moves over here. So never make such time wasting moves on the board. Every move in the game that you play is very important, and you should not look for some random checks which your opponent can easily block or counter attack you in one move. Tip number 10. Learn to blockade. Please. So here is a very interesting situation on the board. White's rook is attacking black's queen as well as this rook over here. So basically, this is a skewer that white has placed, and obviously black cannot capture this rook because this rook is being guarded by this bishop over here. Also, black queen cannot capture this rook because even this is being guarded by this bishop over here. And if black queen moves to anywhere else on the board, then white can deliver a back rank checkmate on the board. So therefore, here the best way to respond to this situation and save black's game is to block it. And the only way to block this deadly attack by white is by getting the knight in between. So black plays knight to e4, blockading the attack. Now I know white can easily play f3 and attack this knight over here. But by playing f3, white has weakened this diagonal over here and black can now take advantage of that. So black will play queen d4 check. King moves to h1 and now knight g3 check. King moves to h2, knight f1 check. I know we are sacrificing a knight over here, but we will soon get back our material. So if rook captures knight, then queen e5 check. King moves to h1 and now queen takes bishop, wins back material. And black has also successfully saved his game. So when you are under critical attack, learn to block that attack. And now if you really have the ability to cross 1200 rating, then you should be able to solve this puzzle on the board. Here it is black's turn in the game. So what would be the best move for black? Let me know your answers in the comments box and I'll see you in the next video.